Ben, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Right here in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Beautiful. Oh, did you have snow over Halloween?
We have already had snow. We had our first snow this year in June, that late. The last snow in June, and then the first one in October. So pretty short period between the two snows.
Yeah, awesome. So no snow here in Baja. No surf either, I have to say. It's been like small and shitty. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear me complain about my life. So
not in Baja.
Yeah, dude. Hey, dude, thanks for joining. Like, it's been a wild year for you guys, and I think we met, a year ago. I saw your product at IAPA. We'll step through that and what got you there, and
right.
and what you're going to be doing at IAPA this year, and we'll, in a minute. But how's the team doing, and what's it been like for you, like this entrepreneurial adventure?
Well, and people often ask me how we got into VR, and I often answer and say that crack and heroin are not boring. So it just wasn't hardcore enough, So we had to find something even crazier, and that's of course a joke, but it is an insane commitment. You've been an entrepreneur, you've started companies, and it's hard enough just being an entrepreneur, but then in a bleeding edge, cutting edge industry like VR, there are no knowns. There's everything's being figured out. The hardware you're using is shifting, the software shifting, everything's shifting, and so it's been a wild ride, but it's been fun.
But I think that, I talk about complexity, and I think the VR market, and especially the location-based VR market, is one of the most complex markets you could possibly have, because not only is the technology changing, the consumer awareness is changing, and operator awareness is changing, and their demands are changing, and the real estate market is changing, and how we tell stories is changing. There's so many things changing at once, and the key to that is to sit in the problem longer. And this is something, there's actually a framework, if you guys are interested, it's called the Snowden Leadership Framework. And if you Google it, I'll put a link to that in the notes of both the webinar and the podcast. But there's a Harvard Business Review article about it, and it's called the Cynefin model for complexity and how you manage complexity. And what they say is, don't look for the answer right away. Sit in the problem. Einstein was famously said, "I'm not smarter than everybody else. I just stay with my problems longer." And I think he was full of shit. I think he was smarter than all of us. But that notion of sitting with a problem longer before you rush to the solution is really critical. And this in this market, I think you've been dealing with this problem and sitting with it. This kind of notion of unattended VR now for many years, and that's kind of where I want to start. Is where did the knowledge, where did the thought process start around? We need to. Thanks, Kylie just posted that article in the chat. Where did the thinking around unattended VR can be unattended or needs to be unattended? Where did that start?
Well, it started with us making a VR that had to be attended. So we thought that was, we thought, well, this is the way it's got to be done because it's too complex to be done any other way. So, back in 2016, we launched our first VR product, went into Dubai, one of the largest indoor amusement parks in Dubai, 300,000 square feet. And that was a four-person attraction, and it's still running to this day. Not that was pre-Holocube. So that was actually a pre-Holocube it was a 4-station. Each station had a big giant screen in front of it, and it was this sniper game, and people had a rifle, and they were ducking and weaving, and very, very, very immersive, and the rifle that was in VR was the exact same rifle you were holding in your hands, and you were sniping the enemy AI, so there were no humans being killed or anything like that. But a very, very fun game, and still in operation to this day, and very popular. But it required not only a full-time attendant, but also required a custom installation. And we just looked at it and said, this is not scalable. that was the main thing. So we said, well, how about if we package this up? If we package it up and put it into something that could just be shipped as a kit instead of this custom install. So that's the Holocube you were just referring to, where we put it into a kit and made it where it could just ship on a couple pallets and came with a set of instructions. But ultimately it was too complex for people to put together over there, and we had to send a team out with everyone and assemble it. But at least it was, copy paste, somewhat reproducible. And so that was kind of our first attempt to scale. We had gotten VR to work as a singular experience, as a singular product, but it was hard to scale, it was hard to reproduce. Everything was custom and one-off.
So it wasn't just an issue of building a product that you could replicate. Then, there was a realization that the staffing level was a challenge. And so where was the moment? Was there a moment where you just guys went, oh, fuck, we need to make this unattended? Or was it not an aha?
Well, I wish we were smart. I wish we were smarter or quicker, one or the other. But it took us a while. We developed the first Holocube, and we went to IAP in 2017, and it was a 4-station. It was for all practical purposes a Hologate a year before the Hologate, and we weren't quite sure it was the right solution, but we deployed about a dozen of these, and what we really did. You were talking about Einstein sticking with the problem. We listened. We got them out there onto the floor, into the real world with operators, and we listened. And the feedback that kept coming back is, hey, this thing is expensive to operate with these operators. And then we also found out that operators quite often just didn't listen to what they were told to do. That we take all this time and all this meticulous training and everything, and then we get these service calls, just like, hey, your machine's not working, and then we call up, and after about 30 minutes, we're like, oh yeah, you haven't charged any of your controllers, that's why your machine's not working.
Right. I mean, customers don't listen either. You give them instructions on how to play, and they're not paying attention. Yeah.
Sure. And we, and then we also learned that, the average retention time for an operator in the FEC world is like 90 days. So all those people, we spent all that time training and meticulously walking them through all the procedures. They were gone 90 days later. They didn't pass on that institutional knowledge. It was all gone with them. And so we were constantly dealing with, what were, supposedly, malfunctions of our equipment. And the fact is, it was not our equipment. It was operator error. But, as we developed an understanding of those kind of problems in the industry, we started to have a saying around here at VRsenal: it's their fault, it's our problem. So,
and I love that. There's so many companies in this business that come in with product, and every business probably, where they say, well, it's the customer's fault, right?
Yeah.
And I'm always telling them, it's like, well, if you've built something that your customer doesn't know how to operate, then you haven't understood your customer well enough to solve their problem. And not enough people get that. And the fact that you got that early on is key to your success.
Yeah. No, and that's definitely become our motto. And that's not just, the operator's employees are not listening, or the customer doesn't understand it. But even that goes all the way up to the headset manufacturer has this flaw and it breaks all the time. Well, it's their fault, but it's our problem. So what are we going to do to fix it? We're not going to sit around and wait for the manufacturer. They're a slow-moving behemoth. They're not going to get to it fast enough. We need to come up with the fix.
So what was so I know that, after the Holocube, you did some work with Punchable Social, which I'm a big fan of that.
Right. So we were kind of on our journey, towards unattended VR, and we came up with this alliance with Punchable Social, and they, they're a very cutting edge brand, very fashion forward, and so they wanted, they're not so much a gamified place. They're very much about gastropub quality food and beverage, but they got games. It's hey, you're here hanging out with your friends. What are you gonna do? And VR was the big buzzword, but we're talking about a mostly adult place with adult beverages. Everybody's having fun and they've had a few. So how do you make VR work in that environment? This is not like a Dave & Buster's that is a full tech staff, managing hundreds of games. This is mostly an F&B place with a few games, and those games are shuffleboard and bowling and non-tech oriented. And so we were challenged to just greatly simplify it down where anybody could run it, where regular food waiters, could step in, and so we brought it all the way down to a tablet interface, just a touch interface, swipe, select. It was easy for them to launch. They purchased time on that. That was very much a come and buy an hour, get some food and beverage, very much an analog to bowling. Let's hang out here. And it worked really well, and it's working well to this day. We're all over the country with Punchable Social.
What did you learn from?
Right. So we wanted people to be able to just get in and not require all kinds of help from staff. So we came up with this great idea. We start using audio prompts, and we would use those in conjunction with visual cues on the screen. So so we started out saying, okay, the most important thing is let's get them in those controllers, and let's get them in the controls. So we put the controllers in a prominent place, and then their session would start, and this audio would go, and the visual would come up and say, "Do you see the controllers in the corner? Go grab the controllers." And everybody ignored it and went and put off that headset. And then we thought, well, the audio is not loud enough, and the screen's not big enough. So we had it flash on the screen, and we had the audio repeat twice, and we even put a sign and grab the controllers first, and we went round and round on this and for like a month, and then we just realized, God hasn't been able to reprogram humans. I don't know why we think we would be able to do it. So they want to put the headset on first. Why don't we let them put the headset on first, and we'll reprogram the computer? And so we just realized you have to go with how humans think. You can't come in here and impose upon them your preconceived technological construct. You got to they want to put on that headset. So what we did is we changed our audio cue, and the visual say, go ahead and put on the headset. What we didn't say was, because you're going to do it anyway. So and so that now they put on the headset, and then then we say, in the VR, do you see the two controllers floating in front of you? Step forward and grab them. And all of a sudden it was like worked perfectly. And so it was a realization. Watch the people. It's a people problem. Making VR smooth and frictionless is a people problem more than it is a technological problem. Most of what we learn, we would deploy a unit, and then we would just have one of our people down there 24, not 24/7, but 7 days a week, every single day during the busy hours. And we did that for months and months and months, and just watched and took notes. Then we would make adjustments and see, did that fix it? Did that remove the friction point? Did this remove the friction point? People are starting out too close to the screen. Hey, let's have an audio cue that says, look down. What we originally started saying, have an audio cue that says, stand on the footsteps were indicated, but people would be looking all around. What footsteps? So then we realized, no, you have to say, look down at your feet. Stand on the footsteps were indicated. And so we're just it's 100 little improvements over the course of what ultimately was a year that got us to the point where we could actually start to get people in to VR fully automated. So we quit marketing the Holocube in 2017. Started moving over to full automation with the Holocube. Decided to skip IAPA in 2017 because while we had it fully automated, it had not been tested. And we just don't want to sell crap. Is our basic position. People say, well, how do you? What's your number one plan for servicing VR? It's so complex. The number one plan is to build stuff that doesn't break, and doesn't need a lot of servicing. Everything breaks, but if we can minimize it, that's the best thing. So we skipped 2017, and in 2018 we deployed a fully automated Holocube. And what we also did is we cut it down from 4-player to 2-player, because we realized there were so many places that just didn't need 4 spaces. They weren't.
That's a really interesting point, because I know it's like Hologate this year is building a double-decker Hologate, and I'm like, I talked to a lot of their operators, and I don't think capacity limitations is the problem. I think it's getting people to play VR is the biggest challenge, right? And who people don't understand it. And so building excess capacity and charging people for excess capacity, at this point in time, probably is not the best economic model. So I'm glad you used that.
Yeah. We saw that we just started to see more and more as we listened to the feedback from our customers, that the problem with VR was a real estate problem and a staffing problem. It's taking up too much space, and it's taking up too much manpower. It's not generating enough revenue. Oh, and by the way, it's also too expensive. So here we got this 4-player thing, so we got to charge for 4 computers, 4 headsets. So we got to make it more expensive. It's taking up more space. And so we set out to say, let's shrink all of it. Let's shrink it down to 2. Let's get rid of the attendant, and then, hey, we just cut the costs in half. Not quite in half, but we've reduced that. And so we tested that through the first half of 2017, and it made a night and day difference. Operators who were saying, it's novel, people love it, but this is too hard. It takes up too much space and costs too much. Those guys all of a sudden were flipping around saying, this is doing great. I mean, and so we saw that, and all of a sudden we had this kind of moment where we realized, okay, the first gen product, people loved it. The customers loved the first gen product with an attendant. The operators hated it. And so the second gen product shrunk the footprint, shrunk the costs, and made it unattended. Now the operators liked it, but guess who hated it? The distributors. Distributors hated it because it was still, go ahead.
Why did the distributors?
Because it was still a kit. It's still this kit. They still had to send out guys to cut, it was no longer custom. It was copy paste, but it was still a big pile of parts and bolts and girders and beams, and you had to construct it on site. And so mid 2018, we said, this needs to just be a machine. And we shrunk, we said, once we dropped from 4 stations to 2, we realized that all those locations that only had room for a 2 station were suddenly available to us. And people who had traffic for a 4 station, they could just buy 2. So we thought, wow, that we kept all the market we had, plus we've opened up the opportunity for a lot of smaller venues. And so we realized, why not shrink that down to 1? Shrink it down to 1. If somebody wants 2, they can do 2, 3, 4. Why force people to buy 4 units at once? And
I'm gonna play devil's advocate on that.
I think we might have lost Bob for a minute. I'm sure he'll be back here in a second. But I'll just speak to some of these questions I'm reading here in the feed. Eric from Memories Games saying that the challenge is to get a HMD on the newbie. I've never had anyone say they didn't like the experience once they tried something. Lots of intimidation factors make people hesitate. I think that's super, super valid. I mean, quite often, as we've demoed this or we've done these tests, you say to people, hey, would you like to try out VR? And they constantly say, no, I'm not a gamer. And there's a lot of stereotypes around VR where it's like for techies or it's for gamers. And the trick is to get people to try on the headset, and just once they get in, they're like amazed. But there's all these preconceived ideas and these barriers, and so that was one of the key things in dropping down to 1 unit, because we started out with 4 station, dropped down to 2 station, and then each of those stations had like 10 games available on each one, and so you could go in and there was a menu, and this was the same thing at Punchable Social. You could go in and you could select from a menu, and you could just select this game or that game, and that's fine. But when you have 10 different games on one platform, it is hard to communicate to the people walking by who've never seen VR, what this thing is. You got this big square cube over here, and I heard, you know, as we station people down on each of these locations where people had installed our units, and we had people sitting there and listening and writing down what are the comments as people walk by, what are the questions as people walk by, and you know, people would constantly say they'd stop the attendant and say, "What is this?" And the attendant inevitably would say, "It's VR," because I don't know what else you say. There's a music rhythm game on it. There's a shooter on it. There's a kind of a Space Invaders game. You can't really describe the experience when there's 10 different experiences. And you know, the answer, this is VR, is perfectly fine. If you're talking to somebody who's interested in VR, who's a techie, who's a gamer, who's been reading, you know, in the news about VR. But if you're just your average person walking through who isn't interested in technology, nobody goes to the movie theater and says, "What's playing?" And the answer is Dolby surround sound or Christie digital projection. Nobody communicates the technology to get a customer to come into a movie, but we're trying to communicate the technology in order to get people to put on a headset. And that is the trick. I mean, I really think Eric's correct that that's the trick. How do you get people to put on that headset? And so we found that what was constantly being communicated was the technology. You know, these hurdles have already been fixed in other mediums. When somebody's, you know, says, "What's playing at a movie theater?" they say, you know, Predator or you know, Terminator, you know, and then they say in surround sound or with Christie digital projection or in 3D. The technology follows, but it's the experience that people are really wanting to sign up for.
Sorry.
That's all right. We just I just kept talking.
That's awesome. Well done.
Answering, Eric had made a comment in the feed. He had mentioned that it's hard to get people to just put the headset on, just to get them to try it. And so I was just talking about how in shrinking down to a one screen, one station system, it really allowed us to advertise the experience. So we filmed with Swan, and you've seen Swan's videos, right? The ones up on YouTube where she was playing a mixed reality Beat Saber, and it went viral, millions and millions of hits. So we hired Swan. Yeah, so we hired Swan, and we made this great. We got a 75-inch 4K screen, and we made these great mixed reality videos. And we put in a 300-watt kicker sound system. And so when somebody's walking by this thing now, all of a sudden they see a human being inside of a video game, you know, swinging these, you know, these lightsabers, and they hear this just thumping music coming out, and they immediately get not the technology, they immediately get the experience. And they're like, "I want to play that game." And then they say, "Oh, it's VR." And we couldn't do that when we had all these stations and we had all these different games. Coming down to one arcade cabinet not only made it simple to deploy, but it made it simple to communicate what this experience was. And it caused people to start coming over and putting on that headset.
Yeah, but I want to show, because talk about mixed reality, and I'm a big fan of mixed reality, and I've been promoting to people that, you know, they should be using mixed reality in location-based VR to create context for spectators. They understand what they're getting in, because the first-person view often is disorienting if you don't know what's happening, but your game is actually the exception to that. Because you're watching, because you've got the big screen, and we'll show the video in a second, and you've got the player in front of the big screen, so it's almost like mixed reality. But there has been a really good example of some mixed reality videos, and one of them I want to play, which, in case you guys haven't seen this.
Bree and I are about to compete in a virtual reality game called Beat Saber. All right? Now here's how. We have the Kool-Aid Man in the audience. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! All right, we're gonna take turns using laser swords to slash targets to the beat of a song, and we'll see who can get the highest score. I'll go first. Please root for me, sir. All right, I'll go first, pal.
This for you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh,
get
thanks.
that on.
Appreciate that.
Maybe step on your mark before you put it on because you won't be able to see.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Now be careful now.
All right, thank you. All right.
Okay, this one's left.
Okay.
This one, no, this one's right.
Oh, gotcha. Whoop.
That's my hand. That's my wrist. That's my controller.
Sorry, I wanted to hold your hand. I'm sorry. All right.
All good.
All right, so here we go. Ready?
You got this. Yeah, he's doing great.
Yeah.
Get it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Watch out for the walls.
If you guys want to watch the whole thing, you can just go YouTube Jimmy Fallon Beat Saber and you'll see it. But like that was a.
Are
All
you
right, but
okay,
you know,
man?
for
Seems like you've been through some stuff.
how's that? How people?
Oh my gosh. What do you
Well,
do?
I mean, I think
took my shoes off.
I think Beat Saber is one of those games where it's Jimmy Fallon in mixed reality or Swan, you know, in mixed reality.
It's now Bree's turn.
It's just instantly recognizable what this game is. You can look at it, and in literally 3 seconds, you know what you're supposed to do. And that's been the big driver in getting people to put on that headset.
That's the
It's
left.
just
Yep.
And there's the right here. That's my hand. I'm just wondering.
Was yours hard too?
into arcade
Yes, mine
games.
was yes.
Thing was three seconds. Figure out how to have fun in 3 seconds. But back when like second the earnings, now you're charging. One of the questions was what's the? We'll address that now.
yeah. It's $5 to $7 a play for a single song. So, you know, our typical time they swipe. You know, what happens is somebody walks up. We're fully compatible with embed, intercard, all your standard, you know, card reader systems. You know, we've got units out in the UK, Singapore, India, Dubai, Kuwait, Bahrain, Australia. So we ship all over the world. We've got over 100 units out there operating, and so we have a lot of different interfaces for POS. Some of them have coin mechs, cash acceptors, you know. So we interface with all that stuff. So somebody walks up, let's say just an embed card reader, and they swipe their card. The first thing they hear is just, you know, activated, and the headset starts to descend, you know, and then right there on the screen, you know, it starts giving them instructions. And it only takes about 56 seconds, our average is 56 seconds from the time they swipe that card, have gotten in the headset, have reviewed the instructions, and are playing. But it's one game. They play one song, and they get the score, and they got the whole experience, including ingress and egress, is about 4 minutes. And people charge $5 to $7 for that. Yeah, I mean, the songs are typically about 3 minutes. The total ingress, egress, music, everything, gameplay, it's about averages about 4 minutes. And, you know, we're serving up about 40,000 plays a week right now across our ecosystem. So that's our average, 56 seconds to get in, 2.5 minutes of gameplay, you know, it takes about 20 seconds to get out. So it's about 4 minutes. It can be faster than that. That's one interesting thing. The way it gets faster is when people are standing in line to play. And the person's going through the audio and visual instructions, and they can hear those instructions, and they can see them, the person in front of them. So when they get in, they just end up hitting skip, and then you can, you know, increase your throughput. But it's interesting that, you know, watching that Jimmy Fallon video, it's fun to watch him have fun in Beat Saber. And so we've noticed that too, that with the big giant screen, you got a human being standing in front of that screen playing, a crowd gathers around pretty quick. We constantly see people on Friday nights, like a crowd of 10, 15 people standing around taking videos of their friends play. Just a kind of a spectacle. No, I agree. I mean, I've been shocked. I mean, we've had the unit, you know, operating in some locations that, you know, routinely run 800 people a week through it. And that GameWorks, I think, was that up in Chicago? Shopper, yeah. Yeah, they routinely put 700 people a week through that unit, and $7 per play. So they're doing, and they've been doing that for 5 months, four or 5 months.
You've got,
it is 100% dependent upon foot traffic, is what it is. I mean, I would say our average location, across the board is about 400 plays a week, and that we've got. We've got units that are stuck in like a 1,500 square foot bar, and even those units are doing 100 and 140 plays a week, in some little 1,500 square foot bar. So it's really traffic dependent, but it appeals to all demographics, young and old, both male and female. It doesn't skew one way. Well, one of the things I've just been most impressed with is that. Kind of, because you have to realize we were doing this for like 2 years before we actually came out with Beat Saber and the standalone arcade cabinet form factor, and so we had a lot of experience with VR in public spaces, and we were just wholly unprepared. It's the whole ended up being a lot more than the sum of its parts, and with that big screen and the mixed reality and all that stuff. Just crowds of people standing around, just drawing, and then you have here comes a father and a mother, and they got their kid with them, and they put their kid in, and they've been walking from game to game, watching their kid play, and then the kid gets done, and dad looks over and takes the card from the kid and swipes it, and the dad gets in, and then the mom after he's like, you gotta try it, and then the mom gets in. You sit there and watch an entire family. The old, the young, the male, the female, all go through because it's just so fascinating. I've got 7 kids, and by choice, that was a lot of people always say to me, "Hey, you must be Catholic or Mormon." I'm just like, no. We just we liked the first one, had a second, and kept going, but we're done at the moment. But in any case, we've gone to a lot of fun centers, and I'm 44 years old. And I've played all those games. I'm not like, let me play that again. And so I think it's just something that's also new for the older kids. And you're looking there saying, this is not something I have seen, and I want to try it. And I've seen that.
And so I want to just get back over cost per play. GameWorks is charging $7. I think you told me that charging, because that would be
five is average.
$5 is average. Okay, cool. And talk a little bit about like the hardening that you had to do.
Well, but we had really nailed fully automated VR before we went to IAPA in 2018. What we changed, and like I said earlier, the first gen product, the customers liked, but the operators didn't. The second one, fully automated, the operators liked it, but the distributors didn't. And so we said we got to change the form factor. We got to make this into a machine where it can just be shipped on a pallet, taken off of a pallet, plugged into the wall, and it just runs in 30 minutes. So that was the new work we did going into IAPA 2018. And in order to do that, we had to get rid of a few things. And one of the biggest things was the need to charge controllers and just swap them out multiple times during the day. Because back to that attendant issue, we constantly found attendants not charging controllers, not charging them. And then we would constantly be called, your game's not working. And once again, it was the controller not being charged. So we said, we need the controllers to be tethered. They got to be tethered. And so we went to IAPA with tethered controllers and everything. And we pushed about a dozen of them into the field. And the immediate feedback was that, all the automated stuff that we had come up with previously was working fine. But the new thing that we had added, which was these tethered controllers, those controllers were failing. And I never thought we would solve all these world-class VR problems and get our butt kicked by USB cables. I just thought, my goodness, we have solved all these huge problems with VR. People can get in and get out. It's just frictionless, and it just works. And all we're doing is changing the packaging. That's what we thought. But every time you put together a new form factor or anything, there's always something hiding in the bushes. And those USB cables, I would have thought USB cables were solved. I thought somebody else solved that. And so, they started failing. We're like, well, we'll just order some mil-spec ones. So, you get out there and you check your suppliers and here's a mil-spec one. And we put those in and they failed. And so we went through, and the original unit did not have a retraction system. So originally, people just took the headset off and it just hung there. But then, one of the issues with a lot of the VR industry is the VR industry is kind of like Silicon Valley, Hollywood oriented. A lot of it's kind of focused there, and it's not, hey, did you think about the 7-year-old turning your equipment into a swing? There's not, and that's the sort of thing you start running into. And so we had to deal with that. And so we realized, okay, this thing needs to retract when people are done. It needs to go up, out of reach, and even then, it needs to have a slip clutch on it. So if somebody grabs on it, it'll sink down and be a boring, And even then, when it pulls down, there needs to be some audio that says, "Please let go of the headset." And, so we figured all that out. But those first 12 that went out didn't have a retraction system, didn't have those things, and those cables were failing. And so we worked. Go ahead.
What did you do? How did you solve the cable problem? Because that's like late back in the laser tag business. That was always hard.
Yeah, well, that's it's top secret, but
yeah.
we all basically gave blood transfusions and got holy water and all kinds of other things. And we struggled with it. To be perfectly transparent, we struggled with it. Kicked our butts for half a year. We really thought we were going to be spending most of 2019 doing sales and marketing. We've only ever done one press release. We've been in this business since 2016, and we have hundreds of units operating all over the world. We have one of the largest deployed bases of any commercial VR product on the planet, and we've done one press release. And it's because we've never really wanted to get out here. And I mean, I've known about you, as I told you when we talked a bit ago. I've been watching you and reading your stuff for years now, and I've always told our internal team, that guy, he's at the intersection of VR and the amusement industry. And there's not a whole lot of people. There's people in the amusement industry and people who understand VR and people who understand amusement, but not a lot that understand both. The reason it is true, because you're like, I sent you some videos, and there's these videos of a crowd of like 40 people standing around at a Dave & Buster's watching people play. Oh, just one person after another. And you're like, why is this video private then? Why is it's on YouTube? Why is it? And my answer was, we have not wanted to go out there and do a show like this. We've known about you, but the reason why we never called and say, hey, Bob, let's do something. It's because we have not wanted to, go out there and just contribute to VR hype until we were happy that we could deploy 500 of these units and not be getting calls all the time that things are breaking. And so what we ultimately did, because we have not been just traveling around kind of in the Silicon Valley tech side of VR, but we've actually been down in the trenches with the operators and the distributors. Of course, that question came up early on. And one of the things that we just had to work through with all of this is listen to the customers. We had to put a pause button on the sales and marketing, and we just had to say to the people who place an order, we had to say, just be patient with us. We're going to make these modifications from the feedback. It's going to cost us more. We're not going to charge you more, but we're going to fix some things. And so some of the things we already had fixed was we already have a fully armored, nylon armored headset. Sometimes people are rough on equipment, and everybody's kind of using consumer grade VR equipment in a commercial environment, and people just rip that headset off. When they're done playing, they're done. They're just like rip that thing off, and parts break and stuff like that. So we have this headset's fully armored with engineering grade nylon. All the parts that would typically break are where they've all been replaced, re-engineered, or armored. Same thing with the cables. I mean, we're using industrial grade cables that I don't want to talk about how much they cost because they make me cry.
Feel cheap,
but
okay? Kind of like the
they're sheathed. They're sheathed. Everything's tethered. The controllers can't walk away. The controllers are not.
I think
because we learned this with
any shooting game in an arcade, you'll see the gun has a steel sheathed cable.
Yeah.
Bolt cutters to cut them.
Right. So in over 2 years of running fully automated VR, we have never had a controller or a headset stolen from anywhere.
Yeah.
Ever. So the importance of just meeting every one of those requirements, everything needs to be tethered. A lot of people are talking on film. I have a lot of people say to me from the VR side that aren't familiar with the amusement side, well, you know, Ben, you know, that approach isn't really going to be relevant here shortly because of VR like the Quest and headsets that don't require tethering. I'm like, I don't think you understand the amusement space. We want it tethered. We want it tethered very well. And that's for 2 reasons. One, you don't have to, you know, constantly recharge. Anything that's not tethered is going to have to constantly be recharged, which means an operator is going to have to remember to do it. And that's a point of failure. It doesn't matter how good the technology gets, you can't get better than the humans that have to run it. And the other reason is for theft. So that's why we tethered everything. It hung down. We ultimately installed a retraction system, automatically goes up and down, allows people to pull on it. The text when it's been pulled, when no one swipes, gives an audio instruction. Please let go of the headset. The headset will descend automatically after you make payment, then automatically just reels it back up. Finally ran across the right cable vendor that supplies cables for NASA and a bunch of other very high-tech use cases. And those cables did the trick. And you know, we are no longer experiencing any cable failure at all since we deployed.
Funny, I remember the laser tag with, you know, guns. The cables for the guns were always a massive failure point, and we kept getting bigger and bigger, heavier and heavier, coiled round cables.
And in this case, we went through the flat ones, and that was some of the original ones we did, and we had that same sort of thing. But the speed, I don't know if you remember, but they actually had to upgrade Steam VR because the speed with which people are playing and swinging those things, the tip speed of the controllers was so fast, Steam VR couldn't keep track. So it's just so many different directions and so many bend cycles. It was a really tough nut to crack, but we did crack it. And so everything's fully armored, fully retractable, and really bulletproof. And we've now, since we've deployed those new cables, I think we have we're approaching close to 1 million plays on those new cables. I think we have not had a single failure since then from the core rupture, which is what we were having before.
We need to do a speed round now to get to some of it.
We do, actually. So like in the Middle East, we're all over the Middle East, probably 30 units deployed in the Middle East. And so we do localize the instructions, external and internal instructions, both written and audio, to both Arabic and English. They can select between them because they use both there, especially in Dubai. There's lots of Pakistani and Indian population. And so we're able to do that really for any location very easily. Yeah, we have CE and ROHS. We're CE and ROHS compliant for Europe, and we have all of the SASL certifications and stuff for Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, and also certifications for South Africa and the African countries. So we have those in place.
Awesome. And
sure. Well, that's when we through most of this year, that's been a question mark on the cost of the machine, because we started out at X and then found out, oh, we need a retraction system, we need these specialty cables and all this stuff. Once we developed it all and got it to an endpoint, we did fly our teams all over the world and retrofitted at our expense every single unit that had been deployed with any of the beta hardware, software. We did that at our expense. So every unit's fully upgraded. But then we had to sit there and look and say, so what is the cost of this thing? Now that we have all the features in that allow it to run smoothly anywhere with totally non-technical personnel. And when I mean that, Bob, I mean you can take it off the crate, plug it into the wall. I think you put about 4 bolts in. There's a video that shows you how to do it, and it's running. You don't even have to do room setup, nothing. So once we got to that stage, then we had to go back to the drawing board and say, what's this thing costing? So the current retail price is $40,000. And
what about licensing?
So there's none. And that's one of the big approaches we took. We said, the VR industry is asking too much of operators and of the amusement industry. We're asking them to try a new technology. We're asking them, hey, this game doesn't take up 30 square feet, it takes up 300 square feet. It's not unattended. You have to have an operator. Oh, and by the way, also try a new business model where you have to pay us monthly or yearly. And so we said, you know what? Asking to try a new technology is enough. Let's put it in an arcade cabinet form factor and just say it takes up 36 square feet of space, just like an arcade cabinet. It doesn't require an operator, and we have no new business models for you. You buy the machine, you own it. It's a perpetual license to the greatest VR game on the planet. And a lot of the VR content creators are coming from Hollywood and from the more the traditional game industry, not the amusement game industry. And both of those industries are very much royalty and licenses. Yeah, and so they created all these VR games, and they're like, no, we want royalties. We don't sell our content. We license. And it was one of those things where we just, we're like, man, we want to help get this great content out there in the public space, and we've got this great platform, and the people at Beat Games have just been great to work with, fantastic to work with. They saw the potential in the platform. We saw the potential in their game, and we negotiated, something that would work for the industry to make VR accessible.
And then as far as Beat Saber itself, the content, so somebody's asking about removing certain songs, and I think this is probably more from the consumer version. Because the songs, you basically, when you play one song, the song's about 3 minutes and you're done, right? So there's 16 songs, I think, that it comes with. At the box. And then what about some of the new hit songs that are coming out, like the Imagine Dragons pack? Are you going to make those available to
We'll be announcing that at IAPA this year, and the answer is yes. That's coming to the platform. We expect that to be available in December, and that'll be an additional cost. People will be able to purchase those packs. Like you said, Imagine Dragons just did their 10 top songs, and they did a deal with Beat Games. And so those are official Beat Games licensed. The maps, the Beat maps on them are all officially licensed and developed by Beat Games. So it's not just these kind of like hacked together versions, which are fun, super good. But these are actually legal to be used in commercial environments, and they're just available as kind of like a DLC upgrade. People can take them or leave them. You don't have to ever pay any more money to us to buy anything. Once you own the unit, but you have available, and they're going to be regularly coming out with these, kind of packs from top 40 radio play artists.
Now, at IAPA last year, you showed a couple of other games. You showed the Predator game, and you showed Fruit Ninja, I think. What happened with those games, and do you still offer them,
Right, and the thing is, we do have a catalog of games that we recommend. If they get their first one, they get Beat Saber and they like it, and we've got customers right now saying, hey, this is working fantastically, and what else do you got? Well, we do have other titles, like you said, Fruit Ninja, that can follow on, but we recommend everybody start with Beat Saber because it's just a fantastic game. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. And I think it's there's over 1 billion streams on Twitch, so it's got a certain even social cachet, and it's got some mind share already in the market. I was actually surprised how many people walk in and say Beat Saber. And then here comes this question a lot with location-based VR. People say, well, how long is this going to last? You know, I mean, isn't it just going to be until everybody owns a Quest or everybody owns this? You know, because that comes up. You know, everybody's going to own a Quest here in a few years, and this whole thing's going to be irrelevant. And well, the answer is this, and I've seen it from firsthand experience. The people who own a VR headset at home and can kick butt on Beat Saber are the people who play the most in public, because it is a showboat game, baby. It is like, hey man, I'm sitting at home, I'm awesome at this, but I'm alone in my living room. Here, I can be a god. You know, I've seen guys, right, and it's true. Where you do have a little more weight. If you're used to playing with none of that, you get a little bit of you get a little bit of feedback. But the trade-off is you got to show off in public, and people are willing to make that trade-off, and it's interesting because it's only people who have played VR at home and are VR aficionados that ever mention anything about the extra weight from the armor. Everybody who's never played VR at all just loves that it works. And that's what Steve Jobs famously said about the iPhone. It just works. And that was really our goal here. And people are happy. Yeah. So the hygiene system, I mean, basically as soon as somebody swipes the card, the first thing that's said is activated. And then it says, you can use the wipes located at the side of the station to wipe off the headset. And there's a big sign and it says sanitary wipes, and it's got arrows blinking to the side. So it's both visual and it's audio. And so only about 1 in 3 people do this. Only about 1 in 3 people even care. But those 1 in 3 people keep it clean for everybody else. And we generally recommend, that staff come by just at intervals and wipe it down. But it has not been an issue at all. Like I said, we're serving up 40,000 VR plays a week right now. And I saw in the feed, somebody said, hey, what about you've got this retraction system that automatically lifts up. What if that gets stuck in somebody's hair? What if that can that lift somebody up? Is there any liability to that? We have, when I said we went around and just recently retrofitted all the units in the United States, including at 2-Bit Circus and GameWorks and the world, with this system. That system includes what we put in, a slip clutch. So now if there's anything attached to it, it will not reel in. It won't reel up. Even down to those kind of little liability things, you got to listen to the customers and say, I mean, we've had millions of plays and really no serious incidents at all. We've had like maybe once or twice somebody's like, hey, this pulled on my hair or something like that. But I don't even want that. And so, we went back in and said, got to have a slip clutch system. Can't be lifting anybody off the ground or pulling somebody's hair. And also it helps when some little kid runs across the room and jumps and grabs onto this, instead of having all this just brute force hanging on that, it just slowly slips down. So that's the sort of detail as far as resolution of listening to the feedback we've been doing and how we responded. And the main difference between Rabbids really and our system is that Rabbids, they're really the only 2 fully automated systems out there that have been proven at scale. Theirs is more of your sit down and ride experience, more like your Typhoon simulator. And that's because it's a little easier to execute. You just kind of sit down and put on this thing. And what we're trying to bring to the market is more the full-bodied, full range of motion. You can duck, and it'll feed cable out. When you stand up, it retracts cable up so it's not hanging around you. You got in Beat Saber, you got to be able to step to the right. You got to be able to step to the left. You've got to be able to dodge. So we had to create something that had a lot of freedom of movement. And so what we've really done is bring the first fully automated, full range of motion gameplay type cabinet to the space, whereas LAI's bring in that ride and more the theater experience, which they're both great experiences.
Here, I want to thank you for all your time.